The most dangerous lie ever sold to the human mind is the promise of safety, a stable salary, a predictable future, a comfortable routine. We are taught that security is wisdom, that stability is success. But history quietly whispers a darker truth. Sometimes the safest path is the slowest form of failure. Because when a human being clings too tightly to certainty, they may unknowingly lock themselves inside a life far smaller than the one they were meant to build. Somewhere in the early 1990s, a brilliant man stood at the edge of an invisible cliff. Behind him waited prestige, power, and guaranteed wealth. In front of him was only uncertainty. No blueprint, no guarantee, just a fragile idea and a terrifying probability of collapse. Every logical voice around him said the same thing: stay where you are, protect what you have built, do not gamble with success. Yet the question refused to leave his mind: what if the real danger was staying? Today, the world sees a global empire, a machine that moves billions of packages across continents, data centers the size of cities, a company worth more than the economies of many nations. The name Amazon has become part of daily life for hundreds of millions of people. It feels inevitable now, almost destined, as if it was always meant to exist. But rewind the clock 3 decades and the reality becomes almost absurd. It begins not in a glass tower, but inside a cramped suburban garage. No glamour, no investors lining up at the door. Just cold concrete floors, tangled cables, and a desk built from a cheap wooden door balanced on rough posts. The air is quiet, except for the hum of primitive computers. This is not the birthplace of a corporate giant. This is the starting point of what most people would call a catastrophic career mistake. Because the man standing inside that garage did not come from desperation. He walked away from something people spend their entire lives chasing: a powerful position, a 6-figure income, a future guaranteed to place him among the financial elite. Friends questioned his sanity. Colleagues whispered about wasted potential. From the outside, it looked less like ambition and more like madness. Fear surrounded the decision like a storm. The fear of losing everything, the fear of public humiliation, the fear of becoming the cautionary tale everyone points to when they warn others not to dream too big. Walking away from certainty did not look heroic. It looked reckless, irrational, almost suicidal in a professional sense, and yet something inside his mind insisted that the bigger risk was never trying at all. So what kind of psychological framework could force a highly analytical man to abandon guaranteed millions for a 70% chance of failure? What internal logic allows someone to step willingly into uncertainty while the entire world calls them foolish? This is the story of Jeff Bezos, the silent psychology of extreme risk, and the one terrifying choice that changed his life forever. In the early 1990s, Jeff Bezos was not a struggling dreamer searching for opportunity. He was already winning the game. In his late 20s, he had become the youngest senior vice president at D.E. Shaw, one of the most prestigious quantitative hedge funds on Wall Street. In an environment filled with elite mathematicians and financial prodigies, Bezos stood out as a rare mind capable of seeing patterns others missed. His future looked mathematically certain. Every symbol of success surrounded him: a powerful title, a 6-figure salary that most people would spend decades chasing, brilliant colleagues who pushed the boundaries of finance and technology. His office overlooked the restless skyline of Manhattan, a constant reminder that he had reached the center of the global financial machine. From the outside, his life represented the ultimate professional victory. But comfort can quietly become a cage. Society trains high achievers to protect their success at all costs. Once you reach the winning table, the rules say you never leave it. Promotions become validation. Bonuses become proof of intelligence. And slowly, without noticing, a comfortable life begins to replace a meaningful one. The golden handcuffs are polished so beautifully that most people never even attempt to break them. Inside that polished reality, something restless began growing in Bezos's mind. Despite the tailored suits, the respect of his peers, and the financial rewards, a subtle dissatisfaction lingered beneath the surface. He was not building something new. He was analyzing, calculating, optimizing other people's capital. For a mind wired to invent systems, the work began to feel strangely incomplete. His brain constantly searched for a puzzle large enough to consume his curiosity, a system to design, a structure to build from nothing. Wall Street rewarded precision and calculation, but it rarely allowed someone to create an entirely new world. For Bezos, the intellectual hunger slowly became impossible to ignore. The deeper his success grew, the louder the quiet question inside his mind became. Then, one ordinary day, a strange statistic crossed his desk. Buried inside a report was a number so bizarre it demanded attention. Early web usage was growing at a rate of 2,300% per year. Not 10%, not even 100%, 2,300%. To most people, it looked like an interesting technical trend. To an analytical mind like Bezos, it looked like a signal of something enormous, beginning to move beneath the surface of the world. That single number destroyed his sense of comfort, because if the pattern was real, it meant a massive technological shift was unfolding in real time. Entire industries could be rebuilt on top of it. And suddenly the safe path, the predictable career on Wall Street, no longer looked safe at all. It looked like watching the future happen from the sidelines, and Bezos began to realize that ignoring it might slowly poison the rest of his life. The pressure began to build the moment Jeff Bezos spoke the idea out loud. A digital bookstore, built on top of the rapidly growing web. It sounded simple when he explained it, almost obvious. But inside the structured world of Wall Street, simplicity could also look dangerously naive. Bezos brought the concept to his boss during a long walk through Central Park, explaining the explosive growth of the internet and the opportunity to sell books online. The response he received was calm, thoughtful, and quietly devastating. His boss listened carefully, then delivered the kind of advice that destroys risky dreams with pure logic. It was not mockery or anger. It was rational, sensible, the kind of guidance any responsible mentor would give. He said, "It's a great idea, but it would be a better idea for someone who doesn't already have a good job." The words landed heavily on Bezos's analytical mind, because from a logical perspective, the statement was absolutely correct. That single sentence amplified the conflict inside him. Suddenly, the decision was no longer theoretical. It became brutally real. If he stayed at D.E. Shaw, he would receive a massive mid-year bonus, continue rising through the ranks, and likely become extremely wealthy. If he left, he would walk away from everything. No bonus, no safety net. Just an untested idea and a fragile market that barely existed. For nearly 48 hours, his mind became a battlefield of calculations and fear. Every spreadsheet in his head favored the safe option. The probability of failure was enormous. The internet was still primitive. Online commerce barely existed. Rational analysis kept pulling him back towards security, reminding him how rare his current position was and how foolish it would be to throw it away. But another fear began to creep into the conversation. A deeper one. What if he tried and failed? The golden boy of quantitative finance returning years later, defeated and embarrassed. Wall Street can be unforgiving to those who gamble and lose. The humiliation alone could destroy his reputation. In the competitive culture he came from, failure was not just financial, it was personal. The emotional stakes grew even heavier when family entered the equation. To launch the company, he would need capital, and the only people willing to believe in the idea were his parents. Asking them for their life savings meant carrying the terrifying responsibility of their trust. Bezos looked them in the eye and explained the truth with brutal honesty. There was roughly a 70% chance the entire investment could disappear. Meanwhile, the clock refused to slow down. The internet was expanding at an incredible pace, and every day of hesitation felt like losing territory in a silent land rush. Bezos realized something uncomfortable. Traditional tools, spreadsheets, forecasts, risk models were useless when facing a moment that could define an entire life. Logic alone could not answer the question. And standing in that uncertainty, he found himself trapped between safety and destiny. Eventually, the pressure inside Jeff Bezos reached a breaking point. Every calculation pointed toward staying safe. Every logical model favored the secure path he had already built. Yet something about that conclusion felt deeply wrong. In a quiet moment of reflection, he realized the problem was not the opportunity itself. The problem was the way he was thinking. The mental framework that had made him successful on Wall Street was now trapping him inside fear. At that moment, his entire decision process collapsed. The spreadsheets stopped helping. The forecasts stopped making sense. Bezos understood that conventional financial logic was designed to protect short-term outcomes, not to guide a human being through a once-in-a-generation opportunity. If he continued using the same thinking that had built his career, he would almost certainly stay where he was, and that realization terrified him more than failure. So he built a completely different mental tool, something simple but powerful enough to bypass fear. He called it the regret minimization framework. It was not a business strategy or a financial formula. It was a philosophical weapon designed to cut through the emotional fog of difficult decisions and reveal what truly matters over the course of a lifetime. Instead of asking what made sense today, Bezos forced his mind to travel forward in time. He imagined himself at the age of 80, sitting quietly, looking back across the full story of his life. All the risks taken, all the opportunities ignored. In that imagined future, the pressure of bonuses, promotions, and corporate expectations suddenly lost their importance. From that perspective, something became crystal clear. His 80-year-old self would not regret leaving Wall Street. He would not regret attempting to build a company on the internet, even if it collapsed completely. Failure would simply become another chapter in the story, a risk taken, a lesson learned. That kind of pain fades with time. But there was one type of regret that would never disappear. The regret of omission. The haunting knowledge that he had seen a massive technological revolution forming and chose to stand safely on the sidelines. The idea of spending the rest of his life wondering what might have happened was far more painful than any financial loss or public embarrassment. With that clarity, the fear suddenly lost its power. The decision was no longer about money or probability. It was about the kind of life he wanted to remember. Bezos resigned from his powerful position, leaving behind the identity he had spent years building. Soon after, he climbed into a beat-up Chevy Blazer and began the long drive to Seattle, typing the first version of his business plan on a clunky laptop as the old life faded behind him. The dream of building a revolutionary company sounds glamorous in hindsight, but the moment Jeff Bezos arrived in Bellevue, Washington, the fantasy quickly collided with reality. There were no towering offices, no massive teams of engineers waiting to execute his vision, just a rented suburban house and an empty garage that would serve as the headquarters of a company that did not yet exist. Cold concrete floors replaced the polished surfaces of Wall Street. Inside that garage, the atmosphere was closer to a workshop than a corporate office. The air smelled of dust and raw wood. Cables snaked across the floor. A few primitive computers hummed loudly in the corner. This was not the birthplace of a powerful technology empire. It looked more like a temporary experiment, assembled by people who were unsure if it would even survive the year. One of the most famous symbols of this early mindset was the door desk. Instead of buying expensive office furniture, Bezos made a deliberate decision to save every possible dollar. He bought cheap, solid-core wooden doors from Home Depot and mounted them on simple 4x4 posts. The result was crude but functional. For Bezos, it was more than furniture. It was a psychological statement about discipline and resourcefulness. This new life demanded something far more difficult than financial risk. It required the complete death of ego. Only months earlier, Bezos had been a respected executive navigating the elite circles of Wall Street. Now he was a beginner again, working in a dusty garage, assembling desks, running cables, and performing tasks most corporate leaders would never touch. Pride had no place in this environment. The technical setup itself was chaotic. Early internet infrastructure was fragile, and the computers powering the new website demanded more electricity than the suburban house could safely handle. Thick orange extension cords stretched from the house into the garage to feed the growing cluster of servers. Sometimes the circuit breakers would trip without warning, instantly shutting everything down and forcing the small team to restart their fragile systems. In July 1995, Amazon.com quietly went live. There was no celebration, no massive launch event. Just a small group of people staring at a computer screen, waiting to see if anyone in the world would actually buy a book from a strange website created in a garage. Minutes passed, then hours. The silence felt heavy. Every second without an order allowed doubt to creep into the room. Then suddenly, a small sound broke the tension. A bell rang inside the garage. Someone, somewhere, had placed the first order. The team had programmed the bell to ring every time a purchase happened. At first, the sound felt magical, proof that their crazy gamble might actually work. But soon the bell rang so often they had to disconnect it, leaving Bezos and his team packing books on the floor late into the night, sometimes crawling across the concrete at 3 a.m. just to keep up. As Amazon began to grow, the romantic image of a startup quickly vanished. Every day became a battle against the limits of the early internet. Pages loaded slowly. Servers crashed without warning. Bugs appeared in the code at the worst possible moments. The tiny team often worked until exhaustion, fixing problems through the night just to keep the website alive for the next morning's customers. Building a company in the 1990s internet meant surviving constant technical chaos. Orders slowly increased, and with that growth came an overwhelming operational grind. Books had to be sourced, packed, and shipped with precision. Customer emails poured in with questions and complaints. There were no automated systems or massive warehouses yet. Sometimes Bezos himself helped pack boxes on the floor, taping packages together while thinking about how to scale a system that barely held together under the current demand. During this period, Bezos established a philosophy that would shape the company forever. Instead of obsessing over competitors, he demanded something different from his team. Ignore the noise. Ignore the giants in the industry. Focus entirely on the customer. Every decision, every system, every improvement had to revolve around creating the best possible experience for the person placing the order. This obsession became the company's true compass. From those early struggles emerged another powerful mindset. Bezos called it the Day One philosophy. The idea was simple but demanding. No matter how large the company becomes, every day must be treated with the urgency and hunger of the first day of a startup. The moment a company begins acting like day two, complacency begins to grow, innovation slows, and decline quietly begins. Day one meant permanent urgency. Outside the company walls, critics were watching closely. Many financial analysts believed the entire experiment was doomed. Amazon was spending enormous amounts of money expanding infrastructure while showing little interest in immediate profits. Newspapers and market commentators mocked the company, and some analysts even labeled it Amazon bomb, predicting a spectacular collapse once investors lost patience. But Bezos refused to bend under the pressure. Having escaped Wall Street once, he was not interested in rebuilding the same short-term thinking inside his new company. He continued investing aggressively in long-term growth, logistics systems, and technology. While critics demanded quick profits, Bezos focused on building something that could survive for decades, not just impress quarterly earnings reports. The ultimate test arrived in the year 2000, when the dot-com bubble burst. Hundreds of flashy internet companies collapsed almost overnight. Investors vanished. Funding dried up. Many competitors simply disappeared. Yet Amazon survived. The discipline forged in that dusty garage, the obsession with efficiency, and the relentless focus on customers kept the company alive. Over time, those thousands of small, disciplined actions compounded, slowly transforming a fragile startup into what would become the everything store. When people look at Amazon today, they often see the illusion of instant success, a trillion-dollar empire, massive warehouses stretching across continents, space rockets, artificial intelligence, global logistics networks. It feels like the inevitable outcome of genius, but the truth is far less glamorous. This empire did not begin with luxury offices or unlimited capital. It began with cheap wooden doors, cold garage floors, and a decision fueled by terrifying uncertainty. The myth of the overnight billionaire hides the real story. For years, there were no guarantees, only persistence. The foundation of Amazon was built through endless nights of packing orders, fixing broken systems, and surviving criticism from people who believed the entire idea was foolish. Success did not appear suddenly. It was slowly carved out of discipline, patience, and an unwavering belief in a long-term vision. At its core, the story of Jeff Bezos is not about technology or retail. It is about the true nature of risk. Most people believe safety comes from avoiding danger, but the reality is more complicated. A life built entirely around comfort can quietly trap a person in mediocrity. When fear controls every decision, opportunity slowly disappears until one day the safe path becomes the biggest regret of all. The famous garage was never really about the building itself. The garage represents a mindset. It is the willingness to start small, to work without prestige, and to accept the discomfort of being a beginner again. You do not need a perfect office, perfect timing, or perfect resources. What you need is the courage to begin before everything feels ready. Bezos solved his greatest fear with a simple question that anyone can ask themselves. Imagine your life at 80 years old. Imagine looking back at every opportunity that appeared in front of you. Which decisions would fill you with pride, and which safe choices would quietly haunt you? That perspective has the power to expose the invisible limits we place on our own potential. The years will pass whether you act or not. Time never waits for perfect conditions. Somewhere in your life there may already be an idea, a project, or a path that scares you enough to matter. That could be your day one. The real failure is not trying and falling short. The real failure is never stepping into the arena at all. If this story awakened the builder inside you, subscribe to Success Stories to fortify your mindset. Leave a comment below. What is the one risk you know your 80-year-old self is begging you to take today? Until next time, stay resilient,